So if you're trying to figure out where you're looking, just peep that camera. All right, I'm going to speed round some of these. Holy, feel free to layer in, and we can go from there. So, one, I think we got way more consistent with this on the back half of the night, but I think just generally, like our positioning on the triple ad sets, we can make ourselves a lot more consistent. Even on the sets where we're spawning all the eggs, our boss is still kind of far from the set that we're not knocking, right? So here we have knock diamond or knock triangle, knock diamond, knock star, and we get the knock right before the grip. But you see, even with the knock, the boss is like so far deep to diamond that not even the ads from star that like are our no knock set get pulled. If we look at that in like a layout here, um, the boss is like on circle, which is generally fine, but it needs to just be like a couple meters more towards the sets that we aren't knocking. Because if I let this play, and you ignore the guys coming in from downtown, we just mass grip and we miss 3 on star, 3 on triangle. We do get all of them from diamond, but like even with knocks, we're still like even on the set without knocks, which we should be getting every time. We're still missing some of those, even in like some of our later prog. And this is more just for me and Cammy right now, but there is like a shotgun effect if you're too close to the knock. I don't know if you see here, the parasites get knocked kind of in an arc, but on some of our better pulls at that same time, if you position better, let me find this time. It's like 45-ish. If you position better, you can get it so that you don't shotgun. I found the fadeaway to be very effective, but you see where the boss is on this pull. It's like right up on star. So those are definitely getting gripped. We knock from triangle, we knock from diamond, everything gets scooped in. There were a couple out here that were still like just a touch far. So I was looking at, like, this is Osk's grip, and Vess has the boss right now. So Osk may be able to mass grip off of himself and just like stand over near star, as opposed to mass gripping off the boss. There are some ways that we can optimize this, and that'll help primarily in section 1, where we've gotten pretty consistent, but just upping our consistency there. So Osk, I know you're not here with us now, but I think that could be an easy fix. Another thing I wanted to kind of compare is just where we're standing during the ingest Black Blood. So if I let this run, right, we've got a little gaggle of ranged hanging out in the AMZ, and we do consume the whole AMZ, so it's not like we're wasting any of it. But there are people like off screen back here, which are 2 melee healers are going to have a hard time necessarily being in range of consistently. If we look at that relative to a kill from today, right, this is the furthest out that people kind of are, is in like the star and circle marker range. We're like almost in the next section. So generally this hasn't been a big problem, but our Holy Paladin and Holy Priest are the primary people who can actually get your heal absorb off. So if Ferris can't reach the hunters and mages, and he could definitely reach Kieran here, but these guys are going to be like right on the edge of 40 yards if they're even there. Take a minute to like step in and get healed. Being somewhere between like in the circle star range, you can even hook over to the side, right? But just making sure that you're in healing range. This is going to be pretty minor, as we've gotten that down pretty well. But again, same thing here. So this is the ingest Black Blood in phase 2, and you see we even still have some like spells flying from far off screen in this set, right? If we look again at that same kill log from today, the furthest out people are is kind of at that triangle marker, right? Whereas again, we're kind of almost standing in the previous section. So I think just getting comfortable, and this is just a few folks, right? But it's not the same people every pull. So I think just getting comfy with being in a little bit more is going to be helpful for some of that healing off. I was doing some comparing, contrasting with avoidable damage. So this is our damage taken from Vile Discharge on one pull. We're at like 100 million. Most of it's concentrated in the tanks. If we compare that to a different log, again, with the same time scale, they're at like 88 million. With just fewer total hits, right? And generally, like, they're also 3 tanking for what it's worth. But generally, just fewer hits on the whole. And when they are getting hit, they're mitigating a ton of it. Whereas when we're getting hit, I think our highest mitigation was like 47%. If we look across the whole night for these, you know, it makes sense that melee bubble to the top of this list. But I think getting comfortable with if we know we have, like, and there are instances where you have to get hit by a swirl, right, to pop an egg. Like, I'd never expect this number to go to 0, but I think what would be helpful is when we know we need to get hit, if we're pressing our personals, if we're pre-potting and doing all of the things that we need to do to stay alive, let's get those mitigation numbers up, so that if we have to take something, we're doing it in a safe fashion. But on the whole, you know, there aren't, we from the previous raid night to now, our swirly damage taken over the night is way down. Like, this is 2 billion, with a DTPS of 347, right? If we look at last, like the raid night prior, the total number is going to be much less, right? But if we look at it relative to DTPS, right, we're at almost 400k versus the 347. So we are bringing that down, right? 2 billion, 1.19 billion. This was almost half as much time rating as well. So this is an area that we can improve. Tanks kind of just will be hit because they have to position the boss, so there's only so much dodging that they can do, but that's just a quick area that we can improve. And I'm nitpicking here because we're actually not too far off of some of the recent prog kills. I think it's just building that consistency that's going to be helpful. All right, let's talk DPS. Sorry, I'm just kind of zooming here. Does anyone have any questions on anything so far? Or thoughts, comments, general bemoaning?
Sounds good so far.
Sweet. Okay, so let's talk damage. So I'm going to talk primarily boss damage here, just from a, like, where do we want to be? Because we're the way that we've set up our lust is such that we're aiming to skip things in P3. Even if we can't skip things, based on our raid comp, it's still generally better to lust in P3. And that's the more common kill strat right now. So this is our boss damage in phase 1, right? Just like up until the boss starts wiggling away to the next section, right? We're getting about 2.8 billion into the boss in that window. If we compare to a group that lusts in phase 1 and 3 tanks, right? They're at about 2.93, right? So they're lusting there, but 3 tanking. So they're a full DPS short, but they do have their haste buff. We're about 200 million short of them, but we're not that short of where RLE suggests we are from an overall track standpoint, right? You want to be somewhere between 60 to 65% boss health when we exit this. So if we look just real quickly at that, right, without, and again, this is without lust, Brood Twister is at 64.5. This is not our lowest either. This is just the pull that we got the deepest on. We were consistently getting quite low in the back half of the night. If this updates with me here, right? Another 64.5. We had a 64 even. Oh, that one didn't actually update. This one we wiped in phase 1. But we were consistently getting the boss to that 65 mark. I think we can still do more. And to facilitate that, I think we're going to make just one change headed into Tuesday, and that's going to be to have Jonesy play full single target, like no beast cleave, no nothing, BM. So Biz will continue to pump ads as marks, but we're going to toss a BM Hunter in there because we're blasting the parasites. Where we're currently a little bit behind, I would expect, is on worm damage. And so some of our full single target classes, it's easy for them to shift over and just start hitting a worm. But all that said, we're very, very close. I think, and we're in the tolerance window, even in our best pull. And so let's talk about our best pull a little bit here, which was 27, where we actually got to the end of P2 for the first time, which was great. We had in phase 2 about 2.2 billion boss damage. Compare that again to the 3 tank. They had like 2.4, call it. So we're still like 200 million short. And this is with 3 tank 4 heal. So I think we need to find a balance of the specs that we have in are very good at cleave or funnel. So I think shifting the focus a little bit from the cleave side of that to the funnel side, just from a how do we target, what are we playing, is going to be really important. And I think if we look at kind of some of the classes that bubble to the top here, right? We obviously don't have DKs. They're just good at everything. But Shaman is an easy like boss damage pumper, Rogue, Paladin, Mages, right? If we kind of side by side that with what we're at, Rogue, tracks, right? Elan's playing full single target because she's a gamer, right? Paladin's up there. I think I'd love to see Fars and Zarnik a little bit closer together. Same thing with Vidvid and Taco, but I know that we're learning some marking stuff there. I think just figuring out how we pull kind of the bottom of our boss damage set up. A big part of that is Cami and I have kind of rejiggered some of our prescience targets going into Tuesday just to help with that push. But again, from a health standpoint, our goal, the RLE suggested goal coming out of this phase is 33% boss health when he starts channeling the next Black Blood. Which, if we look at resources for Brood Twister, we're at 35 when he starts wiggling. And that's with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 deaths, right? If we play cleaner, this number will be lower. And if we also look at, oh no, I have a filter on, so it's going to break things. If we also look at when he starts channeling, which is after we call the wipe, right? So the damage will just naturally be higher here. Come on, logs. There we go. If we look at when he actually starts the cast, which is what the trigger is, we're at 34.5. So we're about 1.5% off. And our hope is to find that so that we can make this last phase way more straightforward, right? And this is 6:30 is our lust window. So we have to live this, and then we break a set of eggs, and then we lust pretty much right when we had our last, like we called the wipe, right? So the reason that we do this is so that we can turn our map from what's in the Brood Twister channel into this map, right? The first 2 sections are the same. The third section, we do a set of 3 with 2 spiders, 2 worms. And then we just break a single egg, which is 1 worm, 1 set of parasites. And we're just full pumping the boss. at the end here. So that is our goal as we think about these moving pieces. Okay, so I think that's the goal from a simplification standpoint. I don't want necessarily everyone to start changing talents and start changing a bunch of stuff, but we are going to make some targeted adjustments to that standpoint. Okay, next thing I want to talk about is, we've talked a lot about swirlies as kind of one of the secret prog mechanics of this fight. I think the other one is volatile concoction. We've gotten fairly consistent with some of these. On our best pulls, where we see recent prog kills, right? On the high end per hit, we're taking like 1.4 million. On the low end, we're mitigating well. We're taking closer to 1 million. On our best pull, again, we're at like 1.4 million on the high end and 1 million on the low end, right? About where I would expect. On some of our sloppier pulls, that number really jumps up, and it corresponds with when we also have deaths where people are ticking out from sticky web and a concoction is popping. And so I think it's getting consistent in terms of our tank health management. And I know our tanks are doing a ton on this fight. I think one thing that we can do to kind of ease their pain and suffering here a little bit is as we're shifting some folks over to a slightly more single target damage focused profile, in P2 specifically, pointing that profile at the spiders is going to be really, really helpful. This is damage taken from spiders on our best pull. Right, it's very vest focused right now, and there are moments where either Vess or Osk will have the boss and all the spiders. I think one thing that we need to get slightly better at is distributing the spiders between the tanks, such that whoever is holding the spiders is not also holding concoction. If we look at like a comparison pull, right? It's a similar imbalance between tanks. So the fact that it is imbalanced in and of itself is not necessarily concerning. But I think what would be helpful is if we can just turbo blast the spiders down. For us right now, this is, again, our best pull. This was kind of what ended up causing our wipe. Is we spawn the last egg. For context, this is the last egg set in P2. This is number 3 here. It's a 3 spider, 1 parasite set, just for context, okay? We spawn the ads. We hit all the eggs. We're good to go there. We get the spiders. We get the little guys gripped in. A couple things happen here. One, we stand near the spider that we just spawned. So Taco just gets gibbed by this spider. After you spawn a spider, generally good practice to walk away from it. And then 2, we get these spiders together. We do a good job of getting the concoction on Osk. So Vess here has all 3 spiders and the boss, but we put the concoction on the right tank. So like our allocation is correct, but it takes us a while to kill these 3 spiders. And the 3 spiders have this channeled ability, or casted ability called Vicious Bite that puts a stacking debuff on tanks. And I don't know why it's not letting me click on right here. Necrotic Wound, that reduces healing taken by 10% per stack. So when the spiders are alive for as long as they were, we have blood decays getting like 50% reduced healing. It's like a 50% MS. So I think just pointing more damage into those spiders is going to make us more consistent. Because what's killing us is not necessarily the concoction. It's how hard and how long the spiders are hitting our tanks, such that when it comes time for them to deal with the concoction, they're out of buttons. So it's a balancing act between those two. So shifting some of the focus there is going to be good. If we look at comparative logs from recent prog kills, these two both 3 tanked, and they're naturally just able to spread the spiders out across 2 tanks. So In a 2-tank world like we're in, we need to just make sure that we're slapping those spiders down. Okay. Webs. So sticky webs aren't necessarily a major cause of any of our wipes, but they are an additional source of damage and coordination that we need to kind of get comfortable with. If we look at just a random pull, right? Like if I just grab pull 27, and we take a look at Holy's POV, because he's going to have an easier view of these. Like we're calling pre-spread, we're getting the webs out, we get them out, and we break them, right? Like we're pretty consistent with that pattern in P1. In P2, where we're less comfortable with those timings, we're going to be a little bit sloppier with some of our spreads, just because we don't necessarily know where everyone's standing yet. So you see here we get a couple in melee that take a second to peel off. Not necessarily a problem individually, but when you take them in aggregate with other like concoction damage and swirly damage and eggs, it adds up. So I think one thing that we need to just get comfy with is handling the clearing of the sticky webs in a cohesive manner. Again, our sticky web damage taken is actually like relatively low compared to this other log. They just had 4 healers. So they're able to afford to take more sticky web damage. If we look at web eruption though, we are still splashing some folks with our dispels. So while we need to clear them faster, we can only clear them when people are out, are safe, and press their macro. And right now, what's happening is, and this is again our best pull, 27. A lot of that dispel burden is currently sitting on Holy. I don't know from a healer standpoint if folks are just not pressing their macros, or if we're able to just self-clear so efficiently. If I look over the course of the whole night, I would expect Holy to be highest because he's first in that dispel list. But I think getting like others potentially balancing out some of that load so that we can clear efficiently would be helpful. But I acknowledge that we do have it assigned. I think if you don't have the ability to self-clear, make sure that you're getting out and pressing your macro. As I was going through, you can't necessarily check in logs whether or not someone pressed their macro, but I think just a friendly reminder that we need to make sure that we're doing that. Okay. Those were like my main points that I did want to hit. I was just kind of going back through as folks were trickling in here and taking a look at what killed us. And still the primary cause of our wipes is egg breaks. There are a few instances of kamikaze spiders on the first set of P2 in particular. This Holy died a ton at the exact same timestamp because he would get slain at an angle by a spider. So you'll see here, we spawn a spider. It just comes from like the front of the room. He's got healer aggro because he's blasting in this moment, and he just gets bopped. This exact same thing, like this same spider spawning on Diamond, comes out and hits Holy on 4 different pulls. So not necessarily something that Holy's doing wrong, but I think we need to make sure that if we have like a misdirect in that moment, we're getting it and we're briefly tapping the spider on Diamond. And I think just from tanks, when you take a look at the replay of this, make sure that you're taunting that Diamond spider. That one in particular has been a consistent pain point of ours. Last thing I'll mention before I just open it up to general comments from the group here is in P3 we're used to having 4 markers down and going to and breaking those 4 markers. In P3 we're only going to have a set of 3 markers. My triangle people just don't break any eggs here. And same thing with this. Doses, we need to get out, we need to get safe, but we don't want to break other eggs outside of the single one that's marked star. And this will let us just put our full lust, which happens when we break this egg set here, into the boss primarily, while still managing some of the eggs that will break from the black blood. And then once that lust is done, we'll have just a set with a single egg. All of the rest of the eggs in this phase are kind of just spread out like along the rim of this section. So they all kind of pop as at a hard enrage, quote unquote, with this strat at the same time. But from everything that I've seen, if you're able to get 33% when he starts this channel, coming out of this phase and starting this channel, with our damage profile, we should have no problem hitting that. So that's our current goal. If we do this 1 or 2 times and we're super far off the DPS check, we'll just plan to do the whole of P3. And we'll keep our lust, we'll keep our cooldowns assigned. We have cooldowns assigned out past this moment, right? But the map will then change from what you just saw back to this, where we have we'll do one more set of triple worms here, this set of ads, and then one more set of triple worms. The goal is to avoid those triple worms if we can, so that we only have one triple worm set, because we are still taking a ton of damage from missed kicks. And if we can cut that out, we can make ourselves a lot more comfy. That does bring me to actually one last thing I wanted to mention. This is kind of minor. The kill order of the worms. Right now, we're pretty consistently killing the X worm first on every single set. So like first set, it's further away. We want to kill it first. That's fine, right? Second set, we actually want to kill the skull worm first, right? If we look at this in a replay format, right? And here, I know I have a POV of this, so I'm just going to switch to me. If we look at the second set of ads, just from a like live and die standpoint, right? We have like this skull worm over here that is dying like half the time as the X worm, but every other pull, it's different, right? Like every other pull, the X worm dies first. And some of that is just where the boss is and where we're getting all that passive cleave. But if we can consistently hit the X worm second and the skull worm first on that set, we're going to be a lot more comfortable. Same thing over here. On this first set, we actually also want to kill the X worm first, right? And we're generally doing that. But it's not super consistent, right? So this is the set where we have those ads. We have the boss pretty close to the X-worm, so it's natural that it's going to die first. But you see, so here we have it down. In some instances, though, the people who are out here kicking Skullworm are also hitting Skullworm. So I think we're putting our damage into the right spots on some of our best pulls. On some of our worst pulls, we have some of our heaviest hitters out single targeting a worm so that they can get next kick. So just getting comfortable with that is going to be good. And then especially in the last phase of the fight, where we have triple worms, we're going to want to kill worms in the direction that we're going. So X first, then skull, and then skull over here. But just making sure that we're hitting the appropriate worm for what we're doing is going to be large. And some of that will come just as we get super consistent with our P2 boss positioning, which was already getting way better last night or on Thursday night. So that's all my points. Holy, anything that you want to add that I may have missed?
I don't think so. I mean, it was pretty comprehensive for like, if I was to like do a TLDR, it would be like very much just, watch avoidable damage.
Yeah.
And then there seems to be, it's very split for the 3 roles, right? You have the tanks have some different responsibilities than DPS, and I mean, like, maybe, I don't know. anything that you might be struggling with, we can maybe like adjust on stuff.
Yeah, and if there are things
And
that we're not seeing from our 10,000-foot view from like a personal responsibility standpoint that folks have questions on, like please feel free to use your channels. Um,
yeah, the
it's
only thing I could think of
happy
like
to help.
from a healing point of view is I mean it's pretty common to 3 heal this fight because there's not that much damage, but the damage
Mhm.
that does come is pretty predictable. So if you people want to like know when to use their personals and stuff like that, it's like the intermissions are like 3 minutes apart, right? So it's like there's not that's probably the most amount of AoE damage. Everything else is probably
Yeah.
like if you get targeted by an egg or sticky web if it's too slow. But
Yeah,
better
sticky
pre-spreads will
web is
probably be
probably the
good.
least,
I can't really.
right? I think when you need to know to personal a sticky web is when you have sticky web and we're about to pop a concoction, right? If we look at the state of play here, we have a concoction about to fade on a tank that's pretty low. We do get him topped up, but if you're now at half health and you have a heal absorb on you and you get sticky web, like Jonesy here does pot, but probably should also health stone when he's that low because we also need to be topping the tanks in these moments. So it's a little like finding there's going to be one-off moments where you need to make a judgment call, and it really just depends on kind of what else is happening. But yeah, the intermissions in particular are very important. One thing that if you want just like a metric, right? Um, in just Black Blood from like a mitigation standpoint, um, we have like quite a mix. I think the people of the same class I would kind of expect to be in the same spot. So like Rev can probably personal better to get closer down to Cammy here, right? But those are going to be the spookiest moments. But I think the all around like if you get this mechanic, you must personal spot is the first egg break of P2. Because we're gonna have a large heal absorb on the group. Um, let's just go to that, right? So if you look at as this egg break comes out in about 3 seconds here, if you look at the state of raid frames, right? There's a ton of people with a massive heal absorb on them who also have egg breaks, right? So like Eland, Fars, Ferris, Biz, you need to press a big button and probably health pot. Because you're about to get even more heal absorb on you, and we have a concoction that's going to pop in 5 seconds. This mechanic isn't going to kill you. The concoction is what will kill you if you continue to have this large heal absorb on you. So making sure that you're popping that pot, chunking into that heal absorb. You see here when this concoction pops, even though Osk is full, right? Like Luke is already at 5%, but he's sitting on these little numbers here indicate health pot and health stone. But he's sitting on his pot and his health stone. Like we should just rip both of those. Just fucking send them. If you're in this game state, just send him out there. He procs his cheat here and lives, but like if he pots before that cheat goes off, he probably saves the cheat and is comfy till later. Like Bidbid has a giant heal absorb on him and has both health stone and health pot. Rev has a giant heal absorb on him and has both health stone and health pot. Eland as well. Having the heal absorb itself isn't necessarily spooky, but we have sticky webs about to come out. And if you also get a sticky web here, like you got to be pressing something. So it's a lot of it is a judgment call, but I think on the whole, identifying do I have a huge heal absorb on me? Is there a damage event about to happen? And the generally good personal spots outside of that are going to be the ingest Black Bloods or the very first egg break in both P1 or sorry in both P2 and P3. Awesome. Well, I've been aiming to keep these shorter. It turns out that shorter is just me talking faster, but hopefully still helpful. Before I stop recording for the uploaded video, does anyone have anything they want to add? Well, then thanks for coming. I know that this is early on a Sunday, but appreciate y'all.